One of the other controls that we can add to our GUI is a checkbox. So a checkbox is this little box that allows the user to either check it or uncheck it. So it's called a checkbox. It can be selected or not selected. They can also appear in button groups like we did with the J radio button. And when you create the checkbox, the control for it is called JCheckBox. And again, you can create it with a string that shows up next to it, or you can create it with a string and Boolean, which says true or false, whether it's selected or not. So it's very close to the J radio button. Now, the difference between the checkbox and the buttons and J radio buttons that we've learned previously is that they use a different interface. So we used the action performed interface before. Sorry, not the action performed, the action listener interface. Okay. This was the interface we had to write a class that implements for our buttons to work, our buttons and the J radio buttons. We had to implement the action performed method in the action listener class. Now, checkboxes, they use a different interface, which is called the item listener interface, and the method there is called item state changed. So when we add a checkbox, we're going to have to implement this interface. And you can still, just like the J radio button, you can ask a checkbox, for example, if it's selected or not. Now, what we want to do is we want to add a checkbox to our code, or a few checkboxes to our code that will change the background color. Okay, so I'm going to create some checkboxes, and then I'm going to register item listeners for them, and I'm going to implement the item listener so that it actually changes the color of our panel. Okay, so this is our goal. Let's try doing that. So I'm going to come here after everything is done, and I'm going to create my checkboxes. Let's just call it checkbox 1 equal new J checkbox. And let's have this one, and I'm just going to hard code the text for it here. Change background to blue, and checkbox 2, new J checkbox, change background to yellow. And let's create a button group for them so that they're either one of them is checked or the other. So button group, box group, new button group, and let's add both of them. So box group dot add cbox1 and box group cbox2. I'm going to add these checkboxes to my panel. So I'm going to go all the way at the end, and I'm going to say panel add checkbox 1 and panel add checkbox 2. And I need to make sure I create my checkboxes all the way at the top. So let's create them here. Checkbox, checkbox 1, and checkbox 2. I should have code that compiles now. However, I didn't set any of them to be on by default. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the first one true by default. And since I want the background to be blue, I'm going to go to my panel. Panel color. I'm going to go to my panel, and I'm going to say set the background color to the color blue. Okay, so by default, I'm making my background blue, and I'm changing the color to blue. And if they want to change it to yellow, we want to change it to yellow. Let's just make sure that the checkboxes are going to show up and the toggling is working. And when you're working on any project, the best thing is to just get things to work one part at a time. So here, what doesn't it like? Doesn't like blue. There it is. Oh, I didn't write it all in uppercase letters. That's why. Okay, so now everything is blue, and this is checked by default, and it doesn't let me uncheck it. Okay, but if I check the other, it toggles. So it's kind of working like the radio buttons. If you check one, the other gets checked. Now, what I want to do is I want to add codes that when I click the change background to yellow, my whole panel turns to yellow. So what I need to do is I need to add a class that implements the item listener. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to create my class, private class checkbox handler, and it implements item listener. And once I add it, it's going to tell me what method I didn't implement. So if you forget the name of the method, here it's going to tell you. It says it's not abstract and does not override abstract method item state changed. And it takes an item event instead of an action event. Okay, so I know this is one of the things that if you don't have experience, you forget what the method name is called. So I need to implement a method called item state changed. So I'm going to say public void. It's going to look like this one. Item state changed, and it takes an item event instead of an action event. Now, this item event has the same, has the get state, has instead of get command, it has the get item. It has the get source. You can get the source of the object, and you can get the item, also the object. So both of these will work. So I can say, for example, get me the source, and here it's an object. So object, let's say source. And if the source is equal to checkbox 1, then I want to change the background color to blue, else I want to change the color to yellow. Now, how do I get access to the panel? One way is to make sure the panel is created all the way at the top. Okay, so my panel, I didn't put it up here. So instead, I can put it there. So instead of creating the J panel inside build panel, I'm going to move it out so I can access it. That's the easiest way to do it. I'm just going to put my panel up here and make it accessible, just like I did with my other radio buttons. Okay, so I can come now in my item listener and say panel, set the background color to blue. And if they want it to be yellow, I'm going to say panel dot set background color to yellow. Let's give it a try. Actually, we forgot one thing. We need to register this checkbox handler. So I'm going to go back to my checkboxes, and I'm going to create and register that checkbox handler, which is the item listener interface. So I'm going to say checkbox handler, let's call it CH, equal to new checkbox handler. And I'm going to go to my first checkbox. And I'm going to say add item listener. So here's add item listener instead of add action listener, because it's an item listener. And I added the first one. And let's just copy and add it the second one. So now I've added both of them. Let's see if it's going to work. So here, when I click on the yellow, it's changing to yellow, blue, yellow. And this is the easiest way. This is the way I recommend you do the changing of the colors. Another way that was shown in the book is you can actually go to your, once you're inside a frame, if you say get content pane, what this is going to do is going to give you that panel, that pane that's in there. And because the only thing we added to the frame was just one panel, we could say get component at 0. So it's kind of like an array list of items that you add, and then you can set the background color to that. This was shown in the books. I wanted to show it to you here, but that other way of just having access to the panel is a little bit easier. Again, if you want to make sure that a box gets checked for some reason, you can do click on it and it will automatically select the box. And so what I want you to do for this classwork is modify the existing classwork that you have for 17.2. You're going to add 2 radio buttons after the distance. So remember the distance in the last classwork, we didn't know whether the distance was miles or kilometers. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 2 radio buttons, and those radio buttons are going to be miles or kilometers. So if the user has miles selected, you're going to know that the distance is in miles. If they have kilometers selected, you're going to know that the distance is in kilometers. Make sure to add them to a button group so that when you select one, the other gets deselected. Now, what we want the code to do is that when the user clicks on the button, so remember there were 2 buttons on your screen. When the user clicks on the convert to miles button and it's already miles, it's going to show the same distance. And if they have a kilometer and they say convert to kilometer, again, it's going to show the same distance. This is how it would work. But what I want to do is I want to add an extra checkbox to my screen at the bottom that says allow same unit conversion. So if they're allowing same unit conversion, it will just display the same distance. So if they select miles and they say convert to miles, it's going to just show the same distance. If they don't allow same unit conversion, if that checkbox is not checked and they say convert me miles to miles, then you're going to display an error message that says same unit conversion is not allowed. You can display it as an error message, like a label at the bottom, or you can pop up a JOption pane to do that, like a show message dialog, whichever one you want to do.